There comes a moment in every man's life when he realizes no one is coming to save him. No hand will be stretched out to pull him from the darkness. No soft voice will whisper reassurance in the silence. And in that moment, he feels something most men fear to feel: absolute loneliness. That silence, that emptiness, that void of being unseen and unheard. It crushes weak men, but it forges the strong, because it is in the loneliest battles that the strongest men are built. You see, people admire strength when it's displayed, but they never witness the loneliness that created it. They see the victories, the discipline, the power in his eyes, but they don't see the nights he spent staring at the ceiling, fighting his own demons. They don't see the mornings he woke up with no motivation, no encouragement, no one to believe in him but himself. That is where the real battle is fought, not in front of the world, but in silence when the world has forgotten your name. Think about it. Every great man you admire was once invisible. Every warrior who carried strength in his eyes was once a broken soul who carried pain in his chest. Every king, every leader, every giant you look up to was once a man who had to fight in the shadows, unseen, unrecognized, unloved. His greatness wasn't born on a stage. It was born in a lonely room where his cries went unheard, where his failures mocked him, where his heart screamed for relief. But no relief came, and yet he kept going. Loneliness is a test that life gives only to those it intends to make unstoppable. The man who has faced the battlefield of his own mind, who has walked through days where even his shadow felt like a stranger, he becomes dangerous. Why? Because once you survive your loneliest battles, you learn a truth most men will never understand. You don't need the world to stand with you, because you already stood when no one else did. I want you to feel this truth deep in your bones. Picture yourself in your darkest moment. Nobody calls. Nobody checks in. Nobody believes you'll make it. And in that crushing silence, you have two choices. You either break or you rise. And if you rise with a fire that no one can ever put out again, because your strength is no longer borrowed from validation, approval, or applause. It was carved into your soul by pain, by isolation, by loneliness. The world will tell you to avoid loneliness. They will say, don't be alone, don't isolate, don't sit with your thoughts. But that's because most people are afraid of meeting themselves. They're afraid of facing the emptiness inside. They run to distractions, to noise, to people, to anything that silences the war within. But not you. If you've tasted loneliness, you know it's brutal, but it's also sacred. It strips you down to nothing, so that you can build yourself from the ground up, brick by brick, stronger than you ever thought possible. And let me tell you something. Loneliness does not mean weakness. In fact, loneliness is the birthplace of unshakable strength. Because when you've cried alone, you learn to fight without needing an audience. When you've failed alone, you learn to get back up without applause. When you've suffered alone, you learn to carry pain with dignity. And when you've conquered alone, you learn that no enemy outside of you can ever be greater than the enemy you already defeated inside. Some of you listening right now, you're in that battle. You're in your loneliest nights. People left. Friends stopped calling. She walked away. Family doesn't understand you. And you wake up feeling like no one cares whether you make it or not. But listen carefully, that is not the end of your story. That is the training ground of your transformation. The reason life has left you alone is because you're being built into something that cannot be built in comfort. Comfort doesn't shape warriors. Silence does. So don't curse the loneliness. Don't run from it. Embrace it. Because it is in this loneliness that you are being separated from the crowd. You're being stripped of weakness, stripped of excuses, stripped of dependence. And when you come out of it, you won't just be another man. You'll be the kind of man who terrifies the world. Why? Because you know what it feels like to have nothing and still keep moving. This is part one of your story. The pain, the silence, the crushing weight of being unseen. But remember this: diamonds are not formed in comfort. They are formed in pressure, in darkness, in silence. And that's exactly what life is doing to you right now. It is turning your loneliest battles into the foundation of your unbreakable strength. Loneliness has a way of stripping a man down to his core. It takes away the noise, the validation, the distractions, and it leaves you staring directly into yourself. And here's the truth: most men cannot handle that. Most men cannot sit in silence with their own reflection. That's why they bury themselves in addictions, in fake friendships, in women who don't respect them, in endless entertainment. Because silence is too loud when you haven't built yourself. But the men who dare to stay in that silence, the men who embrace it, they walk out of it forged like steel. When you are lonely, you learn discipline, not because you want to, but because you must. There's no one to remind you, no one to motivate you, no one to hold you accountable. It's just you versus you. And that is where true discipline is born, not in the gym with a trainer, not in a classroom with a teacher, not on a team with a coach, but in the dark hours when nobody's watching, when you could give up, but you don't, when you could stay in bed, but you rise, when you could waste your life, but you choose to build. That's what loneliness forces into you. And here's the paradox: the lonelier you feel, the stronger your discipline becomes, if you don't run from it. Loneliness teaches you to show up for yourself. It teaches you to be the man who doesn't need applause to act. It teaches you to move forward without anyone clapping, without anyone noticing, without anyone caring. That's where greatness begins. Because every man who ever achieved something legendary started in obscurity. Nobody was cheering for them at the beginning. Nobody believed in them. They were just men in the dark, fighting battles nobody else could see. But loneliness doesn't just build discipline, it builds character. When you're surrounded by people, it's easy to wear masks. You can be one person at work, another with friends, another with family. But when you're alone, all the masks come off. You see who you really are. You see your weaknesses. You see your flaws. You see the demons you've been hiding behind laughter, behind company, behind distractions, and you either run from them or you face them. And if you choose to face them, something changes inside you. You start building integrity. You start telling yourself the truth. You start shaping a character that doesn't bend just because it's uncomfortable. And then comes mental toughness. Nothing on this earth makes a man mentally tougher than enduring his own loneliness. When you've walked through nights with no one to talk to, when you've sat in rooms where the silence feels heavier than the air itself, when you've cried with no one there to comfort you and still got up the next morning to fight again, you become untouchable. Because what can the world do to a man who has already endured himself? What can they threaten him with? Rejection. He's already lived it. Betrayal. He's already survived it. Isolation. He's already mastered it. This is why the loneliest battles create the strongest men. Because the man who learns to carry himself needs no one to carry him. The man who learns to fight in silence doesn't need a crowd to fuel him. The man who learns to discipline himself in the absence of applause becomes unstoppable when the world finally notices. That's why your loneliness isn't a curse. It's your training ground. It's where you sharpen your blade, where you build your armor, where you carve out the kind of manhood that can walk through fire and not break. And one day, when people see your strength, when they admire your resilience, when they respect your power, they won't know that it was loneliness that built you. They won't see the nights you wrestled with yourself. They won't see the mornings you dragged yourself out of bed with no one there to encourage you. They'll only see the man who stands tall now. But you'll know. You'll always know. And deep inside, you'll never fear being alone again. Because you've already learned that being alone was what made you unstoppable in the first place. The loneliest battles are not punishments from life. They are rehearsals. They are tests meant to sharpen you for something far greater than yourself. When a man endures his nights in silence, when he drags his body out of bed with no one watching, when he wipes his tears and walks forward without applause, he is not just surviving. He is preparing for command. He is shaping himself into someone that others will look to when storms come. Because leadership is not born from privilege. It is not gifted to the loudest voice in the room or handed to the man who has never tasted pain. Leadership is carved in fire. It is written into the scars of those who endured what others ran from. That is why lonely battles matter. They refine you into someone who no longer craves validation but creates vision. They turn you from a boy into a man, and from a man into a leader. Every great legacy in history is built on solitude. The man who stood alone, misunderstood, rejected, ridiculed, that same man became the cornerstone upon which others built hope. The world may mock your silence now, but one day, they will echo your words. They will walk your path. They will follow the strength you forged when you were alone. And here's the truth: most men miss a lonely battles are not only about you. They are about the people you will one day protect, the lives you will one day inspire, the family you will one day raise, the strangers who will one day find strength in your story. Your suffering, if you endure it with discipline, becomes a gift to those who come after you. Your scars are not just yours. They become maps for those still lost. So when life isolates you, do not curse it. When no one calls, when no one believes, when no one stands beside you, understand what is happening. You are being separated, set apart, forged into someone who cannot be broken by ordinary trials. The lonely road is where men are chosen, and if you keep walking it with courage, one day the same silence that nearly crushed you will become the throne you rise from. Remember this: the loneliest battles build the strongest men, but the strongest men don't stop at strength. They turn it into leadership. They turn it into purpose. They turn it into legacy. And when history remembers your name, it won't be because you avoided pain. It will be because you embraced it, carried it, and transformed it into something immortal. That is how lonely battles turn into the kind of strength that outlives you. That is how men rise from silence into legend.